Hello there, boos and ghouls. It is once again October, which means it is my favorite season of the year. Halloween series 2024! Yay! So, this year, for Halloween, I'm doing black horror, or horror noir, as it's sometimes called. In this case, I'm doing films, but this could be films, literature, media of any kind that focuses on the experience of black people. This may be African, this may be Afro-Caribbean, this may be African-American, and indeed the films that I'm going to be talking about for this series are all African-American driven films. Typically African-American majority, if not entire casts, often directed, written, whatever it is, produced by African Americans. And black horror tends to, though doesn't exclusively, tends to focus a lot on elements of race, racism, and the violence inherent in a racially hierarchized society.
In this video, we're going to talk about Richard C. Kahn's film, Son of Ingagi. Now, this is a really fitting movie to start this black horror series for Halloween 2024 because this was the first horror movie with an all-black cast. But it's also just a really properly fun monster movie. So basically this film came out in 1940. It centers around Eleanor and Bob Lindsay. They get married at the beginning of the film, and they've invited Helen Jackson, who is a somewhat disreputable doctor, a kind of mad scientist figure. I really like that she's female. I think that's very progressive to have a female mad scientist, not something you typically get in horror movies, in the Gothic tradition, etc., etc. But Helen Jackson had gone to Africa earlier in her life at some stage, and she returns with a bunch of gold, but also this creature, missing link named Ingina. Ingina is very tall, looks somewhat gorilla-like, and for the most part obeys Helen's commands, right? Now, Helen had been in love with Eleanor's father, and so Eleanor basically sort of puts in her will Helen basically puts in her will that Eleanor and Bob, when Helen dies, Eleanor and Bob can have her house, provided that they live in the house for a certain period of time. You know, standard, you get this haunted castle as long as you spend a night in it type stuff. Very, 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 very common horror trope, right? It's a reasonably nice house, but people keep getting murdered in it. Little do they know that Ingina is living basically in the secret basement, and Ingina periodically comes out and actually ends up killing people. Detective Nelson, played by the absolutely fucking amazing Spencer Williams Jr., who was one of the greatest actors I've ever seen. Detective Nelson is this sort of bumbling, overconfident cop who stays in the house with Eleanor and Bob, basically is not able to sort of figure out what's going on. Eventually, Ingina kidnaps Eleanor, takes her down into the secret basement. Bob and Detective Nelson then figure out that there is a secret basement. Bob breaks the door down while Nelson stands and sort of like, and he just does one of these into the air. He literally does not touch that door until Bob has broken it down. Nelson is my hands down favorite character, so I'm going to disproportionately talk about Nelson because I think he's so fucking good in this movie. So anyway, Bob and to a lesser extent Nelson break the door down. They go down, they confront Ingina, who by this point has actually been shot by Helen's brother, who is a small-time criminal who tried to break in to the house and steal her gold that she brought back from Africa, etc., etc. So Ingina is now wounded. Part of the reason he seems to have kidnapped Eleanor is because when he had injured himself previously, Helen had bandaged his wound. And so he takes Eleanor downstairs and basically like gives her gauze or rags or whatever it is to bind up his wounds. Ingina also happens to knock over a Bunsen burner that's still burning, even though by this point Helen has been dead for several days. So it seems unlikely that in the secret lab that nobody but Ingina knows about, with Ingina not having any scientific knowledge or aptitude, that Bunsen burner would still be burning, but he knocks it over, it lights the house on fire, and so there is an added degree of, we need to get Eleanor and get out now. The problem is Ingina knocks over Nelson, so they think that he's trapped in the burning basement. Bob manages to trap Ingina in a cage, where presumably he dies of smoke inhalation or burns to death, which I'm not real thrilled about, if I'm honest. I mean, yeah, Ingina killed a number of people, but he wasn't like some malicious, malignant, evil being. He was a fucking some manner of non-Homo sapien great ape something. It's not real clear what exactly he is. So, I mean, he wasn't like going around being like, I'm an evil villain. I'm going to kill people because I like doing it. He was literally just fucking doing whatever. I mean, Helen sort of used him as an enforcer to get her criminal brother to leave. And Ingina seems to have had some sort of sense that he was protecting the house or Helen or whatever, even though he actually kills Helen after he drinks a potion that she comes up with, etc. So, the end of the film ends basically with Eleanor and Bob having escaped the blaze, Ingina burning to death, and the chief of police is like, Detective Nelson was such a great officer. He was a fucking fantastic cop, and I'm so sorry that he's dead. At which point Nelson sort of comes out of the woods and he's like, "Oh, that's real nice, Chief. Thanks for saying that." That's partially funny because earlier the chief had been yelling at Nelson on the phone, calling him incompetent and a failure and so on. Turns out Nelson rescued Helen Jackson's gold, gives it to Eleanor and Bob, and they're now rich. Yay! Happy ending for everybody except Ingina and the people that Ingina killed. So, I do want to, before I talk about what's going on and why this is interesting, important, etc., I want to tell you just about my favorite scene. Absolutely my favorite scene. This is one of the best scenes I've ever seen in a movie. And I will die on that hill. Do not disagree. This is a great scene. So there's a scene where Nelson is in Bob and Eleanor's house, right? He's trying to figure out the murders, trying to solve these crimes. He spends a decent amount of his time sleeping, but there is a scene in which he goes into their kitchen. They've gone up to bed. He's officially on sort of guard duty. He goes into their kitchen. He takes 3 slices of bread, goes over to their fridge, puts the first slice of bread in his hand, and just puts like 6 layers of stuff, just smacks it right on that bread. Puts the second piece of bread on top of it, another 6 layers or whatever on there. He's just got himself a nice, healthy sandwich. He goes over to the other counter. And while he's doing this, while he's putting this stuff on his sandwich, Ingina wanders in and just stands behind the fridge door. So when Nelson turns toward us and goes around down to the other counter, he doesn't see Ingina. Ingina sort of follows him around. Nelson goes over the counter, does bunch of ketchup or barbecue sauce, whatever kind of sauce it is he's putting on there. Just tons of sauce on that sandwich. Puts the top piece of bread back on it. Then he sets it down on the table and he goes to look out the window. He hears a noise or something, goes to look out the window. Ingina picks up this giant sandwich that Nelson has just made for himself. Takes a bite out of it, walks out of the kitchen with the sandwich. Nelson turns back around and he's fucking shocked that his sandwich is gone. He's like, I fucking know that I made a sandwich and put it there. I don't know what's going on, but somebody's fucking with my sandwiches now. And so he makes himself another sandwich, another just giant sandwich, 6 layers of stuff, 3 pieces of bread. It is a club sandwich, right? Puts it down on the plate. Goes back, here's another sound, looks out the window again. Ingina comes in, takes a sandwich, walks out. Nelson turns around. Fucking sandwich is gone again. Oh my God, what is going on? Then finally he goes back over to the fridge. There's nothing else there. He's eaten all this. He's tried to eat all this stuff. Ingina's eaten all this stuff. He gets a pickle. I think it's a pickle. It could be a sausage, but I think it's a pickle. He gets a pickle. Then he picks up a second pickle. The second pickle is bigger. He's like, I'm taking that bigger pickle. He puts the first one down. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to take both pickles. Both pickles. This guy knows what's up. Puts the smaller pickle in his pocket and walks off eating the bigger one. I didn't do it justice in explaining it, but it's fucking hilarious. If for no other reason, watch this movie for that scene. Now, what is actually interesting or important about this film? Well, on the level of sort of race-based horror, Ingina embodies these sort of racist stereotypes, racist depictions of African Americans who, in racist literature, racist political cartoons, drawings, comics, cartoons, whatever it is, were often depicted as apes or ape-like. And so Ingina is in this kind of interstitial stage, right? He's not a gorilla as such. He's not a human being as such. He is, again, missing evolutionary link is one way of thinking about him. But he may be a hybrid. The title of this film is, again, Son of Ingagi. There's no Ingagi in the film. There's no son in the film. That's a reference to a 1930 faux ethnographic exploitation film called Ingagi. The premise of Ingagi, it was supposed to depict actual life in Africa, and basically it depicted African women being given as sex slaves to gorillas. That's the short version. Very racist, very nonsensical, very much bullshit, nonsense, fucking racism, can't denigrate it enough type film. And so to the extent that audiences in 1940 could be expected to know of or remember the film Ingagi, the title Son of Ingagi might suggest or might sort of echo these racist tropes of not just the interbreeding of African human beings and African apes, but the idea that Africans, or African Americans in this case, are more ape-like than white people. This is, of course, scientifically nonsensical. It has no real basis in actual biology, physiology, whatever it is, but it was a racist trope that was widely deployed. And so having the source of horror in the film be this character who is a sort of human-ape hybrid is really insightful on the part of Kahn and Spencer Williams Jr., who actually wrote the film in addition to playing Nelson. What this effectively does is it says the source of horror is not some abstract monster or whatever it is. The source of horror is the stereotype created by racism itself, the misguided belief in the racial inferiority of people of African descent. That is the true source of horror.